Hello, nature lovers. Do you love to read books like I do? I've always enjoyed reading books ever since I was a kid, especially books about nature. Unfortunately, as I get older, I find myself with less and less time to sit down with a good book. I've solved that problem with Audible. Audible allows you to listen to your favorite titles while you are driving, at the gym, taking a walk, wherever you are. With all the latest titles, you'll have quite a selection to choose from. And they have podcasts too. Start listening today with a free 30-day trial. To get your free 30-day trial, go to the show notes and click on the link. Happy listening. Hello, friends, and welcome to the Nature Wanderer podcast. Out in the field again today. I was actually out here today. This is Paul, by the way, in case you haven't been listening. I'll introduce myself. I'm your host and your friend while wandering through nature. And today I was out in the field in my backyard, and I was actually out here recording the seed transport episode when I noticed up above some turkey vultures circling. And I just stood here watching them for quite a while because they're such fascinating creatures. I thought I'd tell you a little bit more about them. So as I'm watching them, it's like all of a sudden another one came along. Earlier I saw just one flying overhead, soaring I should say. They do a lot of soaring. There's a little bit of a breeze today, and they're just catching the breeze and the thermals, the warm air that's coming up off of the earth. We're in the spring here, so we're getting some alterations in temperatures. It's cool at night, it's warm during the day, and so you get the hot air during the early morning and during midday coming off of the earth, and it causes these thermals. It's almost like an updraft, a lift for these birds. And a lot of larger birds depend on these thermals, especially during migration, to save energy. So I'm watching these turkey vultures, and they're flying overhead, and they're just beautiful creatures. Unless you see them up close. I don't know if you've ever seen a turkey vulture up close. They're not the prettiest things, but they are really neat, and in my opinion, they're beautiful when they're soaring up in the sky. So I've got 5 of them right now, and they're just circling overhead. Always pops in my head every time I see this one. I see a bunch of vultures circling. When I was a kid, when we used to see the vultures circling, we'd always be like, "Oh, don't stand still. They're watching. They're waiting for you. You know, they'll think you're dead if you're standing still." Not true, okay? But that always pops in my head whenever I see a bunch of vultures circling overhead. Maybe it's from all the cartoons when they would show that. Well, vultures are pretty fascinating creatures. We actually have 2 different types of vultures in the United States. We have the turkey vulture, and we have the black vulture. Now, the black vulture is found mostly south of Pennsylvania, so they're mostly in the south. Doesn't mean they're not in New York State. Right here in Western New York, where I am, we do have some black vultures, just not a huge population of them. The black vulture there's actually a small colony up by Lake Ontario that I've heard about. I've seen some black vultures down around Allegheny State Park before. And you may wonder, how do you tell the difference between a black vulture and a turkey vulture if they're way up in the sky circling around? Well, you look at the wings, the underside. If you see a white stripe along the edge of the wing, the back edge of the wing, that's going to be the turkey vultures. If you see a white patch on the tip of the wing, it's a triangle, like a white triangle on the very tip of the wings, that is the black vulture. Now, if you do get lucky enough to see them up close, the black vulture has a black head. The turkey vulture has the reddish colored head. Now, the vultures have a huge wingspan. When they're up in the sky and you see a bird soaring overhead, how do you know it's a vulture? How do you know it's not a hawk or an eagle? Well, you look at those wings. If the tips of the wings, the feathers, look like fingers, okay, they're separated, and you can actually see them separated, and they look like fingers because the feathers are separated, of course, that is a vulture. Most other birds of prey, we'll get to that in a second, but most other birds of prey, larger birds, will have their feathers tight together. So it doesn't look like fingers. It looks like just the wing. You can also tell by how they're holding their wings when they're soaring. When they're soaring up in the sky, if their wings are straight across, probably not a vulture. Vultures hold their wings when they're soaring in what we call a dihedral. The dihedral is basically a V shape, but it curves up on the ends. So the feathers curve up on the ends, and here I am making the look of it with my hands as if though you can see it. That's what happens when I'm describing it. I talk a lot with my hands here. But they go up, tip up on the ends, and that's the dihedral. So if you can think V shape, think V for vulture, that's a good clue. So if you see them soaring up there, like the 5 I'm watching right now, they're soaring up there with their wings in this V shape with the tips going up a little bit. And they're just, I mean, I haven't seen any of them flap their wings a single time. They're just soaring up there, they're catching the thermals, and that's because the wings are enormous. They are really large compared to the body size, so they can catch that wind, and they can grab it and just soar right through it easily. So if you see like a bird with the wings straight across, has to flap their wings every once in a while, maybe not all the time, but once in a while they're flapping their wings, that's probably a hawk, not a vulture. That's how you can tell the difference between the two. Oh, another thing, I'm watching 5 of them here. Hawks, eagles, very solitary. In the springtime, I actually have, I'm trying to avoid it now. I don't go too far back on my property because I have a nest with red tails in it. So they're nesting on the back part of my property. But there were 2 of them circling around a lot before, doing their courtship ritual before they actually went into the nest. And now I do see just 1 of them now and then. But during the summer, during the fall, you're usually only going to see 1. Very solitary. They have their territory. Birds of prey are eating meat, going after animals. So they need to have enough food for themselves in that one territory. So if they're sharing their territory, they're also sharing their food, and eventually they're going to run out of food in that field, and they're going to have to go somewhere else to find food. So that's why most birds of prey, not all, but most birds of prey like to be solitary. They like to be alone, have their territory. Vultures, on the other hand, they're not actually going after live food, not always. They are more scavengers. They're going after carrion, dead stuff, dead animals, roadkill. So they hunt in packs, they hunt in groups. It actually helps them to find their food easier. And they find larger prey, they find larger carrion, and that way they can share it. They are very communal. So that's why if you see a whole group of these large birds circling around, it's vultures. It's not going to be hawks. Now, another interesting thing is classification of these guys. Now, I did say the other birds of prey. Many years ago, when I started to fall in love with raptors, birds of prey. The classification for a turkey vulture and all vultures were basically in the bird of prey family. They were considered a bird of prey because they eat meat. But scientists are doing what scientists do. I mean, this is the job of science. You know, have a theory, prove it. If it ends up being proven wrong at some point, then you have to prove something new. Come up with a new theory and then prove that. That's the whole scientific process. Well, somewhere along the line, some scientists said, you know, vultures don't really fit in the bird of prey category. And if you look at them, birds of prey have some very unique characteristics. They're meat eaters. They kill other animals, prey. So they need talons, what some people call claws, but they're different than claws. These are talons. They're made of bone, and the talons are very sharp so that they can swoop down on an animal, catch that animal, squeeze tight, killing it. They also have a curved beak that helps them to rip that animal into small pieces so that they don't choke on it. They don't want to be eating it whole, although some owls will if it's small enough. But if they eat it whole, they're going to choke on it. So they have those two main characteristics. They have talons and they have a curved beak. Now there are some other characteristics about raptors, but I'm not going to get into raptors too in depth here. I want to talk about these fascinating vultures that I've been watching. Now the vulture, if you look at them, they don't really have sharp, strong feet. They don't have those sharp talons. They have very short-ish nails, and those claws, if you want to call them, those claws are really not very sharp. They can stand on an animal, but they can't really kill it because the feet aren't strong enough. They don't have a curved beak. I mean, it's got a slight curve on the end. It is sharp, but it's got a small curve to it, and that's it. So somewhere along the line, some scientists said, yeah, they're just not fitting in the bird of prey category. So they started to reclassify it, and they tried to fit it into another category, another family. And it ended up that they started to put it into the stork family. Connection? I don't get it. I got to do more research on this one, but somewhere along the line, someone says, yeah, they belong with the storks. So that's their classification. Personally, I still consider them a bird of prey. Now, some other interesting things about these vultures here is, like I said, they are scavengers. Unfortunately, that's where they get a bad reputation. As soon as we hear the word scavenger, it gets into our minds, bad stuff. They're eating dead animals. They're actually a benefit for us. They keep the disease down. Can you imagine if there was roadkill at the side of the road constantly and no one was cleaning it up? What's going to happen? It's going to start to rot. We wouldn't even want to leave our houses. It would stink out there. Yeah, all the dead animals laying there rotting, corpses rot. Oh man, I don't even want to think about it. You ever drive down the road and you get a whiff of rotting carcass? Wow, you know it's rotting carcass. It's like, oh yeah, something died around here. If you have all this rotting meat out there, what's going to happen? Well, the flies are going to get attracted to it. The flies are going to bring in disease. The disease is going to spread because the flies are landing on our food. Flies are landing on us. So the vultures are actually keeping the disease down by eating the dead animals before they rot. And by the way, vultures have a very unique digestive system. Even if that carrion is rotting, they can eat it and not get sick. They have found that it can be really pretty disgusting, where it would make most birds sick, and it won't make a vulture sick. Now, they're not the only scavengers out there. I mean, surprisingly to most people, another big scavenger is our national symbol here in the US. That's right, the bald eagle. The bald eagle is a big scavenger. They will go after roadkill. Hawks will go after roadkill. Dead animal laying in the middle of the field, they're going to go after it as long as it's fresh. And the reason I say that it has to be fresh is because their digestive system isn't made like the vultures is to eat the rotting meat. But it's a free meal for them. If they're out hunting, that hawk, that eagle, you know, if they're out hunting, they're using up a lot of energy, soaring up in the sky, flying around, looking for their food. Then they have to go flying down and attack it. Here's this dead animal at the side of the road, free meal. It's not running away from you. All you have to do is just go down there and grab it. But as soon as it starts rotting, if they eat it, it will make them sick, not the vulture. They're designed for eating dead meat. Now, a couple of other characteristics that the vultures have that allows them to eat the dead meats is not just their digestive system, but the way their body is designed. If you look at a vulture's legs and feet, there's no feathers on them. I mean, that's true with most birds, but the vulture's feet have large, long toes so that they can stand right in that rotting carcass and not lose their balance. I won't get into too much detail because I don't want anyone to get grossed out and never come back to my podcast again, but they can stand on it without falling or slipping. And when they're done eating and they want to clean their feet, they just pick whatever's left off of their legs with their beak, and then they do the wash. What do I mean by the wash? This might gross you out, but what I mean by the wash is they basically urinate on themselves. They have uric acid in their urine, and that is actually helping to sterilize and clean their legs when they're done eating. All of this designed so that they can eat carrion. Now, another thing is their head. They don't have feathers. I'm going to correct that statement. They don't have normal big feathers all over their heads like most birds do. Their head almost looks bald. If you look close enough, there are tiny little feathers on there, but there's not a lot of them. So that if they stick their head down into that rotting carcass, they don't have to worry about it getting stuck in the feathers and having to clean their head off. It usually just falls right off. Also on a vulture, if you look at their nares, and you're probably wondering what on earth is a nare. Nares is what we call the nostrils on a bird. Okay, the two holes on the side of the beak, those are the nares. Now, the nares on a vulture, you can actually see straight through it. That's so that the carrion, the meat, the rotting meat won't get stuck in their nares. And with one quick snort, it's cleaned out. All of this is designed to allow them to eat this carrion, this dead meat. Now, because these guys are scavengers, and that's pretty much all they eat, can they kill an animal? Oh, I shudder with some of the stories I read on the internet about this. I actually talked to a guy once who was a farmer. He was a farmer, and I met him at a display, and we had some live birds of prey there. This is back when I worked for an organization where we brought non-releasable wild birds into schools, and we did programs about them. They couldn't go back to the wild, so they became nature ambassadors. Now, we were doing a display once, and I ran into this guy, and he was just staring at the vulture that I was holding on my arm. And he's like, I hate those guys. And I'm like, why? I says, these guys are good for us, good for the environment. Would you rather have rotting meat laying around, stinking up and giving more disease? He's like, yeah, but they kill my cows. I'm like, what? I just was floored by that remark. It's like, this is a vulture, a turkey vulture that I'm holding. You realize that, right? And he's like, yeah. I'm like, okay, well, what makes you think they kill cows? He says, just like those darn bald eagles. And I'm like, he says, okay, first of all, a bald eagle cannot take down an adult cow. A bald eagle can kill a calf, yes, but it rarely happens. Usually they're hanging around water sources because they like eating fish more than they like eating other animals, mammals. So I then went on to talk to him about the vulture, about how it's a scavenger. He said, oh no, I read on the internet that the vulture, they gather in groups. Mostly the black vultures do this, where they'll gather in groups and they go flying down, and they will pick on one cow and they start biting at the neck until it drops to the ground, and then they start poking the eyes out, and it's like, oh my Lord. So I finally realized there's no way I'm going to convince this guy of anything else. So I gave him the facts and I just turned to someone else and started talking with them, figuring I'm not wasting my breath on this guy. Now I did go home later and I did look on the internet about this. And yes, sure enough, there are ridiculous stories out there. Mostly from the cattle industry, mostly from unfamiliar, ignorant ranchers who don't know the facts. They just had this all over the internet, and it just blew me away that it was still on there. I did write to this one site, which is some cattle industry site, and I wrote an email to them. I said, hey, you know, this is not the truth. I said, they don't have the capabilities of killing a cow. And I just laid out the facts, and I got an email back saying, oh yes, they do. That was their total response. It's like, okay, whatever. So anyhow, these guys are scavengers. They can kill small animals, like maybe a squirrel if they could catch them, but usually they don't. There's plenty of food out there, except in winter. So what are they going to do in the winter? Well, that's what happens. That is why we rarely see them up north here in the wintertime. They don't find enough food around here in the wintertime, so the vultures will fly south for the winter. They go down to the southern states, and that's where they do their hunting. Now, down in the southern part of the U.S., you will get both turkey vultures and black vultures. When they migrate up to the north in the spring, usually the black vultures stop around Pennsylvania, along that area, and the turkey vultures will go further north. Now, the interesting thing is when they are together, black vultures, turkey vultures, they will hang out together. And the reason is because the black vultures take advantage of the turkey vultures. I mean, they're basically not harming them in any way, but they are taking advantage of their sense of smell. A little fun fact here. Most birds, whether it's a songbird, whether it's a vulture, whether it's a bird of prey, most birds have a very poor sense of smell. They depend mostly on the sense of hearing, the sense of sight. They don't depend on the sense of smell to find food or to sense danger. They have a very poor sense of smell, including birds of prey. Birds of prey, they depend on their hearing and their sight to find their food. Vultures, on the other hand, are split. The black vulture is like most birds. Very poor sense of smell. The turkey vulture, excellent sense of smell. One of the best senses of smell in the bird world. The turkey vulture, they say, can smell rotting carcass a mile away. So when the turkey vulture is out hunting for food, they're using their eyesight, of course, but they're also using their sense of smell. And the black vultures know this. So the black vultures will actually tag along. They will let the turkey vultures find the food, and then they just share in the feast. So, I mean, they don't always do this, but quite often you will see black vultures hanging around with turkey vultures just because the turkey vulture is a better hunter. They can find their food much easier because they have that sense of smell that the black vulture and most other birds don't have. Now, I want to talk about the reputation of these guys. Oh, scavengers, those poor scavengers. It's a word I wish we'd change, only because it's gotten such a bad reputation, the scavengers. A lot of people, they look at scavengers as an animal that eats dead things, which is what they are. But it means that they are dark, evil. This is something that has been kind of put into our minds since many, many years ago. I mean, you see an animal eating another animal, a dead one, it's like you start thinking ghost tales and evil things and evil spirits. And these stories came out about these vultures because of that, when all they're trying to do is get a meal, and that's what they eat. You know, they're designed to eat rotting meat. Let them eat rotting meat. But they got the bad reputation. And of course, stories from many years ago till today, you know, these stories, now movies and even cartoons I've seen, where the vultures are depicted as a bad thing, an omen of bad spirits. I recall a movie I saw once. I don't like scary movies. They freak me out. Usually I have bad dreams after them, or I get spooked easily after them. But it's a tradition in my household where my wife and I, on Halloween, we pick a scary movie, try to make it as scary as possible. We pick a scary movie and we watch it. Usually that night I have nightmares, but that's okay. I'm not a big scary movie fan. But several years ago we saw, I don't even remember the name of it, but we saw this movie on Halloween that we picked out, and it was about a witch and these evil spirits, and it's like you could tell by the music during the movie. It's like, okay, the music's getting louder, it's getting eerie, you know the witch is going to be coming into the scene and take the soul of some kid, and it's like you were prepared for it anyhow. So it wasn't one of those movies where they jump out at you. But the thing that blew me away is it's not just the music. All of a sudden, all these dark clouds start coming in. You know, they're out in the field, these young kids, and all of a sudden these dark clouds start moving in, they're rolling in. And who's leading the clouds? The vultures. Yeah, the vultures are coming in the lead. Like, oh no, really? But yeah, I see that all the time, where the vulture is kind of ushering in the badness. It's like, come on guys, they're actually helping us. They're nature's cleanup crew, but this is the way we depict them. It's been going on for centuries, and so it probably will never change unless I start educating and you start educating. We start educating people about how wonderful these birds are. Scavengers, they may not look pretty, you know, they may not eat what we would eat, but hey, they're helping nature, they're helping us by being nature's cleanup crew. So yes, they do have a bad reputation. And another fun fact, think about the movies you watch. Think about cartoons you've seen. The fairy tales that we were told as kids and the stories we read as kids, and the knight in shining armor, you know, the witch. You know, who's wearing what color? We always think of white as being pure, white as being the good color. And black? All the bad people were dressed in black. The gangsters were always in black. The, you know, witch was always wearing black. All the evil things were in black, and the good were wearing white. So we think of black as being bad, and white as being good. What color are vultures? You got it. They're black. So all of this has been stuck in our minds since we were kids, and so we think of vultures as being bad things. We think of vultures as being evil. We think of vultures as not being desirable to be around. I remember as a kid, I'm going to repeat it again, oh, vultures circling overhead, don't stand still, they're coming down to get you. No, they're not. they're just doing their job. They're probably just enjoying the thermals. I love driving down the road, and just about, I think it's like 5 miles from where I live, there's this big radio tower, really tall, and in the springtime, throughout the summer, the vultures, especially in the spring this happens, the whole tower is covered with turkey vultures. And on a sunny day, early in the morning when it's cool still, this is why it happens mostly in the spring, they'll be up there with their wings spread wide. Now that might freak some people out, seeing, several dozen vultures on this radio tower with their wings spread out wide, and the reason that they're doing that though, not to be scary, they're doing that to gather the heat from the sun. Remember, they go south for the winter. They're not used to the cold climate. There's no food here, no reason to be here. So they head south, so they're not built for cold temperatures. So the vultures, when it's a cool morning, they'll spread their wings, and the black actually absorbs the heat from the sun. So it warms them up nice and quick. Now the conservation status of vultures, they are doing quite well. They're not endangered, they're not even threatened. Vultures are doing quite well throughout the United States, but their numbers could drop. They're vulnerable to climate change just like every other animal out there. So we still have to take care of them. And what I always like to do when I'm driving down the road and I see roadkill in the middle of the road, I will call the local highway department. I don't want me going out there and clearing it off the road, but I want to make sure it gets off the road. So you call the local highway department. They are trained to do it safely. They will take that carcass off the road. They usually drop it somewhere. I know our county highway department has a place where they drop all the roadkill and they let it sit there, and the animals will come and they get a feast. Fox, coyote, the vultures, the hawks, they'll all get their feast there. But if you leave it in the middle of the road, those vultures are going to be in the middle of the road. I recall coming over many years ago, coming over a little blind spot in the hill, and when I got over that little hump in the road, there is a dead deer in the middle of the road with about 6 vultures crowded around it, having a field day. I had to slam on the brakes so that I didn't hit them. That's how close I got to them. I scared them all off, but if I hadn't hit the brakes, my car would have been damaged. I probably would have killed at least half of these vultures. So let's be aware of this. And if you see roadkill in the middle of the road, call the local highway department to let them know, and they'll get it out of the middle of the road so that the vultures aren't harmed, or other wildlife as well. Well, that's about all I have to say right now about vultures. This wasn't even planned. Like I said, I was out recording for the seed transport, and I saw these vultures, and they're starting to disperse anyhow. They're headed over. They've been slowly moving down to my neighbor's field. They're circling around, catching the thermals. I don't know if they're hunting or they're just enjoying the weather. But I'm gonna wrap it up now. Thanks for joining me. Don't forget to rate and review the podcast and let your friends know about it. Share it on social media so we can get more people learning about nature with us, so that they can wander through nature with us. Support the podcast through my Ko-Fi page, or you can become a patron on my Patreon page. Both of those links are in the show notes, or you can reach them from my website, which is naturewanderer.org. You can also find the links on my Instagram page, which is The Nature Wanderer, underscores in between each word. And if you want to look really nice while you're out there watching the vultures circling overhead, go to my store and grab a Nature Wanderer t-shirt. The link to my store with great merchandise for you to wear so that you look good out in nature. You can find the link in the show notes or on my website. And above all, have a great day and keep exploring the nature around you.